This is The Grouch and the Brainstorm. My name's Mike, and I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is June 21, 2011, for what that is worth. And this is episode 2. And tonight, again, I have Matt. Say hi, Matt.
Hey, Matt.
There you go. Always the jokester. And I have Jill.
Hey, guys.
All right. Welcome, both of you. So, you know, a lot of feedback from the last episode. And, you know, the whole point of this is for the newcomer to hear it and keep it raw and keep it real. So we can do that and still be tasteful and respectful. And that's what I like about this thing. In episode 1, a lot of talk about that first meeting and the anxiety around that first meeting and kind of what led to that first meeting and all of those, the emotion, the pure raw emotion that went into getting us from point A to point B, which was, you know, to me it required a little bit of willingness to stop losing all my stuff, you know, willingness to be able to wake up at the right day and time, you know, and you know, don't realize that till maybe a few years down the line. But a couple of things. Whenever we go to these meetings, we hear the terminology keep coming back. Mm-hmm. And obviously, have you ever heard it? Any of y'all?
Million times.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, we heard it tonight. We have all just left a meeting not too long ago, and we heard keep coming back. And so we kept going back, and that's a testament to recovery and something that I feel is required of me anyway. I can't speak for anyone else. So in addition to keep coming back, though, what is some of the other things you hear a lot in AA meetings? Matt, what you got?
That's a good question. I may have to think on that one. There's a bunch, though, but most of the old-timers with me coming in, it was keep it simple. Okay. Just keep it simple. You know, I guess advice or whatever you want to call it. They just, hey, keep it simple. We tend to overthink things a little bit, maybe a lot. I know I do. And so, yeah, it just kind of reminded me, hey, you don't drink today, it's a win. So anything else is gravy. So yeah. That was probably the one I heard the most. So.
How about you, Jill?
When I think about this, I think about all those signs that are on the walls of AA that say, like, let go and let God. Keep it simple. One day at a time. Those things.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, when I think about that first meeting and some of the things that I heard, now, granted, you're going to hear how it works or more about alcoholism, preamble, those things that just stick in your head over the course of time. But you hear the words, get a sponsor. And I heard those words and, you know, first things first, what is a sponsor? You know, is me personally did not like the idea of getting a sponsor, right? I didn't like the idea of, to be honest with you, I don't like talking to people on the phone. You know, when text message came out, you know, as an acceptable form of communication, I was ecstatic. Now I can talk to people, you know. I mean, right. It makes it a little harder to hang up on them, you know. But right. When text messages came out, I was very ecstatic. So I'm hearing what's a sponsor, and I'm hearing people say you need one, you know. Don't even ask, just get one, you know. So what thought process goes into even getting a sponsor? Because this is really, for me, the second thing I had to become willing to do would be get a sponsor. And I got a sponsor for a couple of reasons. Number one, I was suspended from work after my 6th trip to the bed and breakfast over there. And I wasn't quite sure if someone was following up on me because that, you know, are they making sure I get a sponsor? I really need a sponsor, those kind of things. And then my ex-wife, you know, I would talk to her after about a week and she would say, well, do you have a sponsor yet? No, but I'm talking to this guy. You know, I'm talking to this guy and, you know, I'm thinking about it. Knowing I wasn't actually talking to this guy. In my head I was, you know. And, of course, I can see the future, and I'm headed, you know, this is exactly how this is going to go down. You know, I'm going to pull this guy out to the side after the meeting, and I'm going to say, hey, will you be my sponsor? And because I can see the future, this cat's going to go, yes, I'll be your sponsor, you know, and it's like, he went to Jared, he said yes, you know, and it didn't roll out quite like that, you know. So that's the thought process of actually talking to another man every day about whatever was not really something that appealed to me, but I knew I had to have one. So, Jill, what about you? Let me ask you a question here. What went through your mind when you heard the words, "You need a sponsor"?
No thanks. I'm not gonna lie, man. That's not exactly where I saw myself as a grown adult having to ask, guidance. I still felt like I knew a few things. In hindsight, well, I didn't know much. In treatment, they got us to find a sponsor, like someone that's been in treatment a little bit longer than us. So that was kind of easy for me because I was able to be like, hey, can you be my temporary whatever sponsor? And then when leaving treatment, we had to before leaving treatment, we had to find a sponsor. So I had some practice doing that with some people. But yeah, those two were not bad because I felt like they were my peers. So that was pretty easy for me. But I guess I really didn't know at that time what sponsorship meant and what all that entailed. Because I was still foggy-headed and I was still like, is this what I'm going to do with the rest of my life?
Yeah.
I didn't know what the 12 steps meant, and I was still incredibly scared.
How about how long did it take you to get a sponsor?
Oh, I got one immediately. Now, the first sponsor that I got, I just thought she was really cool. And we went through the steps in 30 minutes in a car ride, and I didn't think that was...
She was really cool.
That's a great sponsor, man. 30 whole minutes.
Yeah, and I remember thinking, well, that's really weird. I don't think this is how that's supposed to go. So we didn't last long. I wanted something more, and then I found Marla, my first long-term sponsor. I think I had her for about 6 years, and like I said last episode, she passed a couple of years ago, and she was amazing. But that first interaction... Are we going there?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, we're going there.
Yeah,
okay.
There.
And so, to me, at that point in my life, I was completely socially inept. In the biggest way.
Yes.
I could not talk to people. I had a problem speaking because I got stripped of my Xanax. Hell, I was on that shit forever.
So you were basically a public speaker prior to getting off of Xanax.
No, I would always black out and forget everything.
So
you were probably a public speaker.
So this is the deal. I was so embarrassed and I felt so weird. And I knew someone told me she was a minister, and they also told me she was a counselor. And that's what I thought to myself. I need someone that really knows their stuff, that can heal me in every kind of way possible. And I decided I wanted her because not only did she have all these qualifications that I thought I needed for a sponsor, but I wanted what she had. And I'll never forget asking her in the parking lot of a meeting. I couldn't even look her in the eye. I had my whole body turned. I just couldn't. I felt like I was 12 years old and I was a little boy and I was asking some girl to go with me to the movies. It was the most horrifying thing I've ever done.
Very humbling.
I thought I was going to be immediately rejected for some reason, but she was just thrilled, and therefore I had a sponsor. And that was my sponsor story.
Yeah, I like that. Did you call her every day?
No. Once again, I knew everything. No, I sure didn't. And, I struggled. I struggled pretty hard. Like I said, I kind of tested boundaries quite a bit when it came to all of these things. And she let me find my bottom. She let me find it, while I'm sober and being miserable. And she made me work through it, and which was awesome. I needed that.
And so, let me ask you, in your opinion, do you feel like the sponsor-sponsee relationship if you were to suggest to someone anything, do you feel like there's nothing to be afraid of? Like if you have a brand newcomer coming in and they're like, "Hey, Jill, I really don't want to get a sponsor. I don't like this." Would you tell them, "Hey, it's nothing to be afraid of"?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And tell them, like, these guys want to help you. That's what we're here for.
And I think where we go is so cool that they don't do most places. We ask people that are willing to raise their hands. It takes a lot of because I guess you could get rejected if somebody really wasn't able to sponsor. You could face that a little more if you didn't kind of already know, hey, these people are available to do that, you know. So, and most places don't do that. So
Yeah.
Well, that's how I got my first sponsor. They ask anyone, are you willing to raise your hand? I'm not willing to raise your hand. I'd be willing to raise my hand anytime. I don't even know what you're passing out. I'll raise my hand. I'm a doer. But no, they asked people, are you willing to be a sponsor? Raise your hand. And I looked around the room and seen a guy that I felt like I could probably intimidate. And he raised his hand. And that would be my first sponsor. And of course, he passed as well. So I think before you ever got there, Matt, you never got the chance to meet him. Great guy.
who was it?
His name was Dale H. And he was just an all-around, a very gentle soul. Until you got him on the golf course, and kind of like you guys and you're fishing. Once you got Dale on the golf course,
I can relate.
He was he was still a kind and gentle soul. He just he really had a passion for golf, and kind of like you guys with your external outdoor sports. So when you heard you had to get a sponsor, and you probably heard inside of a treatment center, do you hear that there?
Absolutely. So I didn't. I hear people's stories, and I guess not that mine's unusual. I know a lot of people probably have done it the way I've done it, but there was no recovery looking into it beforehand. There was no thinking about it. Like, I didn't know anything about Alcoholics Anonymous, about sponsors, about rehab for that matter. I mean, and it happened basically overnight, and I wound up in a detox center on a hospital floor, and so it was all new to me.
My first in Mississippi, right?
I was in Meridian when I went to detox.
It's where they put them on the floor. Forgot about that.
And they, we had the first meeting I ever went to was on the detox floor. So in detox, and it kind of progressed from there. But I get to treatment, and I'm sitting in here with all these guys, and they're doing their devotional and stuff, and they're all quoting all this stuff out of the big book. And I'm like, how many times have you been in here? And they're like, oh, like 9. And I'm like, oh. I was like, oh my God, how do you do that? Like, and they just, I was like, I don't have a clue about any of this stuff. But thankfully, the lady who was my therapist kind of walked me through that. And she said, you don't need to go real far, and we need to find a sponsor. Like you do. It doesn't matter who it is. Somebody needs to keep an eye on you, basically. And
handler.
And I agreed. I mean, I at that point, but when I left treatment, I had a little over 90 days, and that's the most I'd had since I was about 13 years old. So, and I was 38. So something was working, even if I was locked up in a building. And that usually didn't stop me in the past before then. But I did. I went. Of course, we relocated here and came to the Koala Club. First meeting out of treatment, and second meeting out of treatment. Bobby, who's my sponsor, raised his hand both meetings. I was kind of sitting by him, and I listened a little bit to him, but just kind of enough to go, he's not like a wanted criminal or something, just not something weird. And so I asked him the second meeting I was at, and he had a real self-depreciating way of talking. I don't want to share details unless I know he doesn't mind me doing that, and I may ask him. I don't think he will, but I'm not going to do that. But
absolutely.
But the way he approached the subject was big picture. We're all in the same boat here. We've all messed up, and I really like that, and kind of put me at ease, because it was like walking up and asking a girl out on a date, almost, and
Most awkward
but you're not
thing.
drunk or high, so and on top of that, a lot of anxiety and yeah, so it was very nerve wracking, and Bobby it really couldn't have went any better. Like, I just felt so good when I left, and I was like, I did it. Of course, I didn't know what a sponsor was. I'm just like, hey, will you sponsor me? Don't know what that is, but are you willing to do it? And he did, and so. Yeah, it was a great relief of doing it, and it goes back to willingness. This program. What I've learned is doing the uncomfortable stuff. I used to use something when I was in uncomfortable situations, and now, like, I really grow. Every little uncomfortable situation that I put myself in, that's out of my comfort zone. Let's call it that. That's when I really grow, and I notice a lot of growth. So even asking a sponsor. 2 days out of treatment, most people will be like, it's not a big deal. It was a big deal at the time for me, and he's still my sponsor, and we do fish, and he is a better fisherman than me. I'm going to say that real loud in the mic so he'll hear that and leave me alone. But
Do you call him every day?
we talk pretty regular, yeah. Not every day, but we talk 2 or 3 times a week, try to fish every Sunday as much as we can. And we have pretty good. He's been my sponsor the whole way, and that's one of those guys doing for me what I couldn't do for myself. I mean, who strolls in from another state and gets a great sponsor like that, and and he's been with me through a lot of stuff, and I'm glad that I have that with somebody that when I call, and I had a situation going through a divorce that it was really rough, and I called him one day and I said, I need you. And he's got a big boy job and he's got a lot going on. And I said, do you have time to meet with me? And he said, Matt, I always have time for you.
Yeah.
And I said, okay. And 30 minutes later, we were meeting and talking. And it means a lot to me, So
One of the qualities I have seen in any sponsor I've ever had, and I've had 4, mostly because of moves, moving back and forth across the state. But one of the qualities I have seen, and it passed on to me, is if I need my sponsor for some reason, he's there. He is there for me. There may be other things that he just doesn't commit to or go to or do or say, hey, I'm going to drop what I got to do and go fishing this weekend. But, man, if it comes to me, he seems to stop and whatever it is that I need. And over the years, those things get less and less, and because the less stuff that I calls. But the qualities in all of these gentlemen are like that. And my sponsor down in New Orleans went through a major tragedy. I'm not going to talk about it on the air, but it was something that I don't know how I would handle it. I would love to think I could handle it in the stoic way he handled it. But to be honest with you, he was there for me even during this major tragedy. So do you remember, and I do this quite often, but do you remember the first time you ever had that initial sit down with your sponsor?
You mean stepwise or asking him?
No, after asking him, just that first initial sit down, and no
Yes.
details needed, but what happened there?
Vaguely. Of course, I think what's been good for me too is he's very organized. I'm always a hot mess my whole life. I'm kind of fly by the seat of my pants. He's very organized. I mean, he shows up. Here's what I got, paperwork. We sit down and eat. This is what you're going to do. And I think I had some wisdom, like I read the 12 steps in the lunchroom at rehab, and I was like, did them in my mind. And I was like, we don't have to do that part because I already did it. And he's like, where? And I was like, oh, in the lunchroom, man, by myself. I did them with myself. Even the men's and stuff, I just did them in my head. They're done, And he kind of looked at me for a little while, and he's like, well, do you have any paperwork on that? That's what he said. And I was like, no, it's just me in my head,
Yeah.
And he goes, well, let's start over and let's do that with some paperwork, if you don't mind, And I said, well, if you think it'll help, So yeah, we started from there, and and it's funny, like growing with him. Now I don't call him about sobriety stuff as much, but we talk about all kind of stuff. But it's some of it is maybe 20% of it, But like I called him today, but it was about a sponsee and me trying to figure out how to deal with a situation with that. And he gave me the opposite advice of what I would normally do, which is what a sponsor usually does, because I had a different inclination on that. But today, that's kind of where we are, you know, and we do a lot of other stuff other than just the program, you know. So
Okay. So your relationship with him now is pretty good, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jill, how about, do you remember your initial sit down with him, like when you guys just kind of, we're going to sit down and, you know, after the ask, you know, so how about this? The first date. Do you remember that first date?
Ours was at No Teenies. I remember that. It was at No
Y'all
Teenies.
literally went
And
on
he
a date.
paid for it. Yeah, he paid for it.
Mine was with a bottle of water at the Koala Club.
Cheap date. Sorry. No, I don't recall, to be honest with you.
Okay. No, that's perfectly okay. So do you have a good relationship with your sponsor now?
I have a great relationship with her. She's amazing. I've had her for the past 5 years, and she sponsors a lot of women. And we all have it's a sisterhood. We have a thread, a text that's going all the time. We take trips together. We go to the lake together. We do a lot of things together. And I love those. I love every one of those women.
I need to join Jill's sisterhood.
We're not allowed, dude.
Me and Joe talk at the end of a meeting ever so often. No, that I think that the sponsor tree, you know, which is probably going a little bit beyond the scope of what we're doing today, but the sponsor tree is so very, to me, it's just healthy and important to my recovery. You know, obviously I can't speak to anyone else, you know, but it's very healthy to my recovery. And what I find interesting about the sponsorship, the whole sponsorship thing, is, you know, we go by the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and we don't do really other things. We do go, you know, the 12 and 12 is another piece of literature that we read. But in the Big Book, the actual Big Book, the first book that was published, they don't mention getting a sponsor anywhere in there. It doesn't say get a sponsor in any of the first 164 pages. It teaches people how to be a sponsor, but in that first 164 pages, it doesn't say get a sponsor. Now, in working with others, it does talk about you and the new man must, you know, take this spiritual journey. Basically, I'm paraphrasing bad here, probably because I'm recording, but it says you and the new man must take this journey day by day. And, you know, that is really the only inkling that I have found in there that even resembles, you know, getting a sponsor. But I think that maybe when we get to the 12 and 12, it does talk about, you know, your sponsor may say this. It actually uses the word sponsor in the 12 and 12. And so getting a sponsor has been pivotal, whatever. It's been pretty important in my life. And not in just name only, but I have actually become friends with these folks. So, you know, how much do you depend on your sponsor now? Jill, do you still depend on your sponsor pretty heavily?
Not heavily, but we do stay in good contact. Like I said, we meet for lunch. You know, all of us will meet for lunch. You know, if I get frustrated about something and I can't figure it out on my own, I'm calling my sponsor. Sometimes I just need someone to just to talk to, just to say it. I know what I need to do. I know I need to get whatever out of my head, and then we both laugh. You know, and so we went to the steps a couple of years ago, but yeah, we definitely stay in contact and make sure we do as much as we can.
Okay. How about you?
Yeah, definitely. I depends a funny word, because for me, with this recovery,
It is a funny word. It's also, you know, underpants for older folks.
and they make them clean now. I don't know if you've seen the new guys ones, but they're fancy.
Pretty sharp.
They are,
you know.
colored and stuff.
And they got the little break in the sides,
Yeah,
come up to the top of the hip, so when you're wearing coveralls.
You know, not going to get too far into how I know that, but
Well, I was just wondering if you'd been going through my closet while I was just...
but depending on him, yes, but not in the way I depended on him 5 years ago.
All right.
And I'm more like Jill now when I have, you know, he's been great in business, just to bounce things off of, handling situations that I'm not real sure about, business wise or relationship, kid wise. You know, I have older kids too, and you know, we've dealt with a few things over the years on that, and he's always been spot on with that stuff. And most of the time, it's the opposite. When I ask him, it's the opposite of what my natural instinct is to do. I would say 85% of the time. But I have noticed as the years have gone on, my natural inclination is more like what he would recommend. So it is wearing off a little. But I do. I mean, even things bother me. I don't hesitate, you know. And we do. And we fish a lot together. And most of the time, we just talk about fishing.
Yeah.
We don't even talk about sobriety
Recovery
that much.
and stuff like that.
And it may come up sometimes or something, or he'll ask me about somebody that we all know each other, and somebody hadn't been around. I say, hey, have you heard from this guy? But that's about it. We don't get too wild with it. It's mostly fishing. So,
Has your sponsors, either one of you, has your sponsors ever told you to do something that you just really didn't want to do?
absolutely.
Yeah.
So mine's real good on resentments. He you know, which is a big deal with us. Going through divorce, going through some stuff where, you know,
It's the number one offender.
That's what I heard. That's what I heard. It's the poll out right now. But yeah, so going through that kind of stuff, he loves to, he gives me rocks. So I have to pray, put this rock in my pocket, you know, whatever that resentment might be with that person, and represent that person. I know you guys know this, but I'm going to repeat it for if somebody doesn't. And then I put it in my pocket, and every day when I put my money in my pocket, I put that rock in there, and I pray for that person. At night when I take it out, I pray again, and I do it for 2 weeks, and I throw the rock away. And for the most part, that helps. You know, sometimes I've kept a rock a little while longer. It's took a little while, but
2 weeks is about your average on a rock.
2 weeks. By 2 weeks, I'm usually over it.
It's amazing how we can sit here years later and the rock means a whole nother thing. You know, a rock never lasted 2 weeks back in the day.
No. And, you know, and I absolutely hate doing that. Like, I don't want to pray for somebody for all their dreams to come true. You know, I want to pray for them to get tore up by pit bulls or, you know, something bad, like an alligator eat them or something.
Definitely not natural.
Yeah, and that's prayer to me. I mean, that is praying technically, you know, but he's specific with it, and I can't pray for that stuff either. So
You get pretty brutal.
I mean, I'm an alcoholic. I can get creative, you know.
Yeah, it is very creative.
He
The
said
chances
pray,
of
but
a magical pit bull.
He knows
period.
me by this point that if he just says pray about it, I'm going to pray. But, you know, it may not be what he's wanting me to pray about. So he's a smart guy, my sponsor.
He is. He is a smart guy. How about you? Anything?
Yes. This, it actually just really cracks me up to think about it. And this was definitely in early sobriety, and we had gone to Monroe for a meeting. I guess I met her or something, but I do recall being in a meeting. She said, now, I want you to go and get 5 women's numbers.
Oh, man.
And I was like, okay. Guess how many numbers I came out with?
I'm going to guess about 100.
You?
3.
None.
Oh, I knew it was low.
That is weird. Oh my gosh, in early sobriety? I don't know you, nor do I want your number.
You wouldn't, so you didn't make the effort to go get them.
I just could not do it at that point.
Yeah.
As I said, I was socially inept, and I had a really... Do you hear all these justifications?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're listening.
It turned out well in the long run.
I knew it was 3 or 2 or something. I was trying to give you a little credit.
I still wasn't okay talking to people, and I didn't do it. And I pretended like I did. Yep.
That about it as far as the things that they've asked you to do. So I have a story about this, and I'm not going to mention any other names. Try to stay away from names. If there is someone that wants to hear their name, just say something, and I'll find some way to work your name into this thing, because you know the people in my life, in my recovery life, really are the only people in my life, no matter what. I have my of course my family, you know, which is my family, and then I have my AA family, which, you know, I'm closer to them as far as physically than I am my actual family, except for my son, who shares the recovery experience with me. But so I asked this guy to be my sponsor, and and again, I have that I can tell the future, and I'm just picturing him say yes, and he's just ready to work with this sick guy, and he says, "Let's see how this works. I'll be your temporary sponsor." And I remember thinking, yeah, they didn't mention a temporary sponsor in any of the stuff that, back at the bed and breakfast that I was in. They didn't mention any of this thing about temporary sponsors. So it kind of threw me for a loop. I don't know what in the heck this guy's talking about. Well, about 3 minutes later, this guy that's a few years down the line from me and this guy that I asked to sponsor, he comes out of the restroom. And and he's wiping his hands and everything, and my new temporary sponsor says, "Hey, I want you to meet this guy." And and I shook his hand, and "Hi, I'm Mike," and he told me who he was, and he said, "Now, if this works out, this is going to be your grand sponsor." And that really got me scratching my head. So now I've heard two terms, grand sponsor and temporary sponsor, that I've never heard before. And I'm thinking, okay, nice to meet you, sure hope this thing works out so we can be relatives, And in my head, I'm just like halfway dying for the simple fact that I can't believe I did this. I can't wait to get out to the car and call somebody, I don't know who, and say, "Hey, I got a sponsor," But now I got to tell them I got a temporary sponsor because I'm, I don't even know what I did wrong. That's like, well, think about it. We go back to the asking a girl out to the movies or a dance, and you say, "Hey, will you go to the dance with me?" Temporarily, this thing works out. I may show up.
And it's funny you said that, because that's what Bobby told me. He goes, "We're going to try each other out." But he explained it to me, and what put me at ease was he's like, "This is your deal." Like, if I'm not doing what you need me to do, you need to find somebody that will, and vice versa. You do a few things I ask you to do, and we're good. But it was temporary. It started off temporary, so I may still be temporary. He never told me I was off, so I may still be. Probably am.
My buddy down in New Orleans that was my sponsor, he says in his story, he asked a guy to be his sponsor, and the guy said yes, and he's been yes, I'll be your temporary sponsor, and he's been his temporary sponsor for 15 years. So but
that just dawned on me. So yeah,
this fella, this grand sponsor that comes out of the restroom, right, and he's washing his hands. So a few weeks later, I'm driving home from work, and at the time I had a really oddball schedule, nothing like I have now. And I passed by a local grocery store, and I'm like, "Hey, I'm gonna run in here and grab a pizza," because besides my normal everyday diet, pizza seems to be what I do for fun. And so I run in there and I grab a pizza. Well, on the way out, this fella that I've don't know very well, this grand sponsor, he's outside of this particular grocery store passing out Tootsie Rolls. He's passing out Tootsie Rolls for some organization. I don't know what it was. It was something he's involved in. Well, my first thought went to, eventually I'm going to have to be out here passing out Tootsie Rolls.
Tootsie Roll guy. Yeah.
And I go get in my car, and I don't even crank it, man. I'm like,
what you're going to inherit from your grandparents there.
And I was like, I said I got to go to any length to get it. And am I going to have to pass out Tootsie Rolls in front of this concern I used to work for, right? Literally, I know that's straight out of the big book, but the thought crossed my mind. I never asked any questions. Of course, I was scared if I asked a question, I was going to get voluntold, hey, your first assignment is to go stand here. Well, that didn't work out. I didn't realize, he was doing something for a completely new organization, nor did I realize that after a certain amount of time in recovery, we get to give back.
Absolutely.
We get to give back, and I remember Dale saying, "Hey, can we meet here every Saturday at the Koala Club? Can we meet here every Saturday at 9 a.m.? And my head said, I really need to check my schedule. Like I had this brutal, grueling schedule. But my mouth said, yes, we can meet here every Saturday morning. And in my initial meeting, what we did was basically laid out the program, the spiritual program of action without using all those words. You know, it's like, hey, this is what we're going to do. We're going to sit and we're going to read this book. And when it says read, we read. When we read, we read. When we write, we write. When we pray, we pray. And we're going to go through this book together. And, you know, and I don't even know if we did any reading that first initial day. But, you know, and to be able to even do that for me was just something like, why is this guy doing this for me? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Yeah.
Why? You know, here I am, and you still have that feeling of uselessness, that great feeling of self-pity. Why in the world is someone doing this? What is he getting out of it? You know, it got to be, you know, something. And, you know, turns out that there never was. And he even told me one day, and I know we hear this a lot from people who talk about their sponsors, but he even told me one day, he said, you know, all I ask is that when you get this thing, you just continue to pass it on to other people. And, you know, and that is not, because he told me that is not why I do it. You know, I do it because I have to stay sober.
Sure.
No matter how many years down the line that I have picked up in recovery, I've never forgot that first initial, you know, that first initial feeling that I had of, you know, I don't know how to stay sober, but I'm going to actually let somebody tell me how to stay sober, other than a nurse or someone at a center. So that was you know, go ahead, Jill.
Well, I wanted to, before, you know, you kind of wrap that up and went on to the next question, you know, I think something very, very important that I did not do that my sponsor asked me to do, and that was actually sponsor.
That is awesome, because we are going to have a great segue into the next question.
Okay.
Please continue.
Okay, I shall continue. I mean, I think it was about 1.5 years when I finally finished the steps. I kind of procrastinated. If you have heard anything in this podcast thus far, you know, I kind of fought things a little bit and, you know, struggled a bit in early recovery because I just wasn't sold on this and I didn't want this to be my life. But, I mean, thank God I did at some point. But anyway, I'd gone through the steps and she was like, well, it's time for you to get a sponsee. And I was like, I can't help anybody, you know, and I was one of those people. Like, self-pity is what fueled my alcoholism and drug addiction and all of that. And my thought, I can't even help myself. I can't help somebody else. I still thought I was too far gone and that I was a complete loser. And I was like, I can't do it. You know, I just didn't feel together or put together or smart at that point. And so I didn't do it. And I want to say it was around year 3, you know, she finally was like, you are going to die if you don't, you know, get a sponsee. And I said, yeah, okay. And I finally got one, and that was a whole nother struggle. But, you know, it took me getting really weird in recovery to finally, like, help someone. And let me tell you, I said yes, and I did take her through the steps. And it's the most beautiful thing that's happened to me in recovery is watch someone else that I helped complete the steps and have their own spiritual awakening. And I think that is exactly when I was like, I'm in. Yeah. I was having a spiritual awakening as a result of her having one. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I can help someone.
Yeah.
And it built esteem and things I did not have at that moment. It was beautiful. It was miraculous for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I have to agree. That is, you know, it says in the big book, you know, it talks about it. This is an experience you do not want to miss. And nobody, you know, walk out there, if someone out there, a regular person, don't even have a drinking problem, right? And, you know, you run into them at a gas station or something, and this is not something that they'll experience. This is something that only we can experience. So, you know, do you sponsor Matt?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Do you sponsor Matt?
Well, yeah, I did that for a long time. It didn't work out good. It's a whole other show. But I was kind of like you, though. It's funny you brought that up because Bobby's like, hey, raise your hand at the meetings. I was like, man, are you crazy? Like, I'm not doing that. You know, I'm just not. I think that's the only thing I was just like, I don't want to do that. And I was like, I'm jacked up enough. I don't need to dump my stuff on somebody else. And believe it or not, during COVID, when the building shut down and all that stuff, go through divorce, go through COVID, working a lot, people weren't working and we were overworked, and it was really bad for about a year and not going to meetings. So when I came back, I was like, I got to kind of get back in this, and started raising my hand a little bit. And then I would get, and this is just the awesomeness of this program, but I remember, like, we go to treatment centers, do meetings, and you can believe me, it's just constantly people, man, sponsor me. Guys would get out, wouldn't go very far, never hear from them again.
Yeah.
And I remember walking outside with Joe B one day, and I said, man, like, I suck, you know, like you know, nothing here. I mean, I can't get a week with a guy, you know, the one call maybe, you know. And Joe turned and he looked at me, he goes, man, the first when I first started sponsoring, he said the first 5 guys I had all went out and went right back to drinking. And I called my sponsor and I said, man, I'm terrible. I'm the worst sponsor ever. Mm-hmm. And he goes, Joe, did you drink today? And Joe goes, no. He goes, well, then keep doing what you're doing. Mm-hmm. And I went, okay. And that wisdom of just calm down a little bit, you know. I like that my heart's not in it. You know what I mean? I like the fact that it's like, hey, if you do what I did, it's very cut and dry. And I have the same stuff from my sponsor that I did. That's what my sponsees do. And I can pull mine out and show them this is the same piece of paper. And everything that I asked them to do, I did and still do. So there's nothing there. There's no false stuff. And when I think with sponsees, you know, I know we all get a little hard-headed and they say, well, I don't think I need this or that. And I go, you may need to find somebody else then, because this is what I did and it's the only way I know to do it. So
right.
That co-signing thing, I'm not too big on that. So
how many do you sponsor? How many people?
I got 4 right now.
Okay.
So
Jill?
I have 4.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. It's crazy.
Yeah, it is. And I talk to a lot of mine, I would say on a daily basis, but I kind of picked up this practice with them as I do with my first sponsor. My first sponsor was an everyday guy. He came every day. And so I wouldn't call him, which my callophobia, whatever it is, you know, I wouldn't call him, but I would see him every day. And it was a very simple, how was your day? He would shake my hand, you know, and then if there was something going on, we would sit and talk. And then towards the end of his life, you know, we would have regular conversations after the meeting. And, you know, just discuss whatever it was. It could be, are we going to go golfing Saturday, or you got anything pressing going on? Here's what's going on with me. He would share some of the stuff that was going on with him. And, man, the importance of a sponsor in what we do, for me anyway, it's just been phenomenal. And I don't know how many guys I sponsor. I probably should have you know, done a little tally before I sat down here, but I definitely don't want to leave anyone out. But, you know, I have my own sponsor story. I for some reason, God has blessed me with these amazing stories in AA, or maybe it's just the fact I can remember them, and a lot of people can't, right? But I had my daughter tells me, I was in down in South Louisiana, and I'd moved down there, and I hadn't been down there very long, and I took a service position. She doesn't understand what service positions mean. You know, the highest position we're ever going to have in AA is a service position.
Absolutely.
It's that of a servant, and I like to live my life like that. The highest position I'll ever have in life is that of a servant, and that's okay, you know. But I took a service position, and I called my daughter one night on the way home, and I talked to her, and she said, no matter where you go, you've just got to be important, don't you? Well, I thought about it, and she's right. You know, she was right. At some point or another, you know, the old ego creeps back up.
Sure.
And, you know, and of course I gave her the spiel I just gave y'all. Oh, honey, the highest position you'll ever get is a service position, you know. And inside I was thinking, that kid just called me out again. She's been doing it her whole life. But anyway, so my year came up, and I couldn't sponsor anybody for years. What my sponsor told me, I didn't question it. and I had the whole fear of just like anyone else, what am I going to be able to do? I'm not that good, and all we did was read out of a book and go through the 12 steps and just talk. And that was it, really. And become really good friends. And I think at this point, I feel like I might be capable of becoming a really good friend. But I also had that overwhelming desire to be important. I want to be like this guy over here and that guy over there, and they've all got sponsees, and they talk about their sponsees. I want one. And so I think it was my very first anniversary, like my 1 year today, that day. And, the whole meeting, I wasn't even itching for anything other than to raise my hand, whenever can anybody sponsor? Yeah, me, And so the meeting came to an end. Of course, I raised my hand, probably a little too enthusiastically. I think most people just raise their hand. They don't shake it over their head or both hands. And not expecting anything. Really, I just want everybody to see me. This guy can sponsor people now. How important
He's a badass.
Yeah. Whoa. He's a sober slinger. But believe it or not, a gentleman approached me. And he couldn't have been any more different than me. Matter of fact, we were exact opposites. I was 39 at this time now. I got sober when I was 38, and I was 39 years old. And he was, I want to say, mid-50s, maybe early 50s, which is my age now. And but I often say he was a lot older than me. He was a different race than me, which does not matter whatsoever to alcoholism. Could care less. He had military service. I had nothing compared. I hunted a couple times. He was living at the Salvation Army, and I wasn't. He had lost his family due to this illness. I had lost my family, but they were coming back at this point, or starting to be back in my life a lot more. And I was thinking to myself, there's no way. Again, my mind said one thing, this sick mind said, this is never going to work. And my mouth said another, sure, absolutely, I'll sponsor you. And we would meet up in that front room probably 3 times a week, because at this point I don't know what, me and Dale met once a week. I don't know, maybe we can get this guy sober faster. We meet 3 times a week. I didn't know what I was doing, but that's okay. I just did what I kind of prayed about and what God worked into my life. And so we would meet up there, I want to say about 3 times a week. And we met for, I want to say, about 7 months going through the steps of AA. And to my knowledge, he's still sober today. And that would be going on his 11th year.
That's great.
And I think somewhere around year 9, he texted me, and he had moved on, and I think he went to college and got education and ended up living life, maybe for the first time since he had been done with his military service. I don't know. So I can't be exact on these things, but he has, my point in a lot of that, though, is, your first 5 failed, or Joe's first 5 failed, and so a lot of them, you just don't hear from anymore. Right there in the middle, and you meet with them every day, and you don't hear from them. Well, my first one caught it. He stuck and stayed. So I'm sitting here thinking, well, this is easy. This is gonna be, man. If it is tomorrow, I'm gonna pick up 3 more.
Talking about that, a situation, and the gentleman I'm referring to, talking about sponsorship, and I have sponsees and that kind of an attitude type thing. You texted me one night when I was out of town. I was in Mississippi. My grandkid was being born, and you said are you looking for any sponsees or willing something like that? And I said sure. And I got back, and this person was very much the opposite. I would call him a special case, probably, in our deal, without getting in his business or too much detail. But I met with the guy, took him home. As we're driving in the truck, he told me some stuff that is definitely nothing that I would agree with or anything of that nature. And it was nothing I'd ever dealt with before. And I dropped the guy off, and he came to meetings for a while, came every week. We worked on his stuff. But I remember thinking, I'm not cool with this, you know. And I think I talked to you about this, and I know I talked to Bobby about it. But I was driving the guy home, and I was thinking, oh man, like I don't want nobody thinking I sponsor this person, you know. And when I dropped him off, I was like, man, what is wrong with you? Like, why are you judging? You know what I mean? Like, I felt so bad, and I was just like, who am I to sit here? The dude's trying to get help, and I offered to help him. That's all it boils down to, you know. But I was like, what's wrong with me? What's going on with me that? And the guy kind of faded out after a little while, but you know, it's one of those things. I mean, we have to check our own motives sometimes, you know, and that was a weird situation,
Yeah.
but and I have not heard from that guy. I don't know what happened, but he just kind of disappeared.
Well, you know, do you find Jill, in your sponsorship or your sponsoring people, do you find them that come and go on occasion?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's just part of the deal.
Yeah. And again, that goes back to something Lois told Bill back in the day. You know, you're still sober. Carrying the message, you know, is what we do in order to stay sober. You know, and sponsorship and that direct sponsorship is very important to me. I can only speak for myself, and obviously you guys have said it for yourselves, you know. But also what I find in the program of AA, which is the fellowship, but there's those indirect sponsors, you know. And when I say indirect sponsors, there's one now that sits in the corner every day that's been my indirect sponsor for the past going on 12 years. And whenever when it's something that I really need to do, step work or something like that, absolutely, I'm going to my main man, right? But when it's something that's just eating at me and I sit down, you know, but whether it's an indirect sponsor or a direct sponsor, I always almost get the same answer. Pray about it. Anybody ever heard that one?
No,
Yeah.
never.
Or you already know what the answer is, which is, you know, and if I find myself looking at that from a bird's eye view, basically they just said, admit there's a problem, find a higher power, turn your problem over to the higher power. You know, steps 1, 2, and 3, and then somewhere in there, I find the other 9 steps have to be put in play somewhere. And these are the indirect guys, you know, the guys who have pulled me up over the course of the past, you know, several years.
We had a birthday tonight, and that's exactly what I was thinking about. And I don't know if I ever told you this, but that guy whose birthday was tonight was a friend of mine, and I used to work with him, and he got in some trouble, and we all know the deal. And he just got a year, and he's done really well. And when he came into his first meeting and sat through that, and we got him a big book, and he read some of that, and he didn't come back for a while, and he got in a little more trouble, and then kind of the time came for him to come back, and he did. But he came back and he said, well, I guess I need to get a sponsor. And my sponsor and I both know him personally. And you know, I'm pretty sure my sponsor was like, I'm not sponsoring you because I know you and all that stuff. And he asked me, he said, who would you pick? That's what he asked me. And I thought about that, and I was really grateful to be in here and have a regular group, because I knew people's programs and what they do. Mm-hmm. And I told him that night, the guy he has now or the guy sitting across the table from me. And I said, those are the 2 people that I would ask if it was me. And he said, why? And I said, because if it was up to me and something happened to my sponsor, that's one of the 2 guys I would ask. And I can't give him a better compliment than that. So he asked one of those 2 people, and he's done really well.
Yeah.
But it's a blessing to be around when you have family or you have friends or you just have people wander in from off the street, you know, and you go, oh man, you know, you can kind of, that indirect stuff I love that. Just hanging out, and you know, new people they're spazzing out for the first 90 days, you know, and the ones that are really trying, they're hanging around a meeting because they got crap on their mind, you know, and they just want to get it out. And you can listen and go, yeah, it's all right, you know, come back and just kind of be there to listen, because there's a lot of people listen to my stuff, you know, a lot of people. So.
Is there anything that either one of you that you take away from your sponsor that you use whenever you sponsor people?
So much.
Yeah.
Every
one thing you can think of?
I mean, the biggest one that which is, gosh, it almost makes me tear up, is my first sponsor taught me about gratitude. And I did not know what that was, to be honest with you. I was not taught to be grateful for things. I don't mean that in an ugly way. I just didn't know, like, I was supposed to be grateful for things. And things weren't going my way in early recovery, so I started getting really frustrated. And Marla was like, you know what? You need to do a gratitude list. And I'm like, what? And I remember doing that gratitude list, and it was rather difficult because I couldn't think of anything I was grateful for. I was like, yeah, my legs, I sure like them. I can walk with them, and it's like, oh, yeah, my eyeballs, I can see with them. That's great. And it was really like superficial and almost insincere and like just lame, to be honest with you. But over time it developed, and I always, even today with like my clients, I had them go around the room and name something they're grateful for. It's really important. I'm so glad I learned that. To me, it's everything. That changed my sobriety big time, is being grateful for the little things, because she called them penny miracles.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, gratitude's it's everything. My whole sobriety has just been coming up on a birthday, and I spend the month before it every year thinking about the year previous. And when you really sit and you spend some time thinking about the people and what God's done that you had no way of doing, like even this year has been, it started off horrible and it's ended the best year like that I've been in a long, long time.
Well, the year's only been since...
Well, last year I meant, I guess.
Okay.
And the start of this year has been pretty good. Yeah. So it's been pretty
I was
awesome.
on the
So you're off to a good middle.
I'm off to a good middle, guys, is what I'm trying to say. But gratitude to me is everything. That's all when you get the self-pity and the stuff going in your head, gratitude will knock that out pretty quick, So, but I don't know how you can be in this program and have any amount of time at all and not know what gratitude is, and it be a big deal.
And it being an action word.
Sure, absolutely.
Thanks is a word. Gratitude is an action word. We do something to show our gratitude. And, I'll say this. I've been sponsoring people for a long time, and I've had a lot of sponsees. I've had 3 pass away. One was from alcohol poisoning. One was from suicide, and one was from his stomach. He had stomach issues related to alcohol, and all 3 of those affected me in different ways. But and gratitude would probably be something that just pops its head out there and says, "Hey, look at me. Look at you. You're alive, man."
Absolutely.
But if I picked up anything from my very first sponsor that I still use today on a regular basis, it's service. And, and absolutely there's nothing, gratitude, your thing, and mine would be service. And that's strictly because someone has to make sure that this organization, or what we do to stay sober anyway, which is not the only one in the world, that it stays running and goes on. I remember my first few years, and I would hear people in meetings say, "We want to make sure AA's around for our children." And I remember thinking, God, I hope your children don't end up here. It's like, you're sitting here planning out there. You must some household stuff going on that we don't know about up here, But, I never thought about it until it was my child that needed it, And he don't mind me saying that. He's cool with all of this. So I think that that's going to wrap it up for this episode. I do want to do a little lead into the next episode, and of course this particular one we were missing Jennifer J again, and we will have her hopefully on the next one. And she's back, and she's got stuff going on this week because she was out last week, and got to respect that. But we need her on the show. We need that perspective from that sobriety angle, and we'll have one at each end of the table instead of just these few. But next week I would also like to talk about life after AA. One of the biggest questions I ever have for myself whenever I was thinking about getting sober and kicking this idea around for 11 years was, what's life going to look like once I get sober? what am I going to do for fun? What is going to be there? What is life going to be like? And I'm not going to talk about it right now. I want to. Well, it's just itchy. You know, I gotta just, you know, who would have thought I would love pizza as much as I do? You know, I no longer wear it. But that's what we're going to talk about on the next episode. And I do appreciate you guys coming out. I know y'all got some busy schedules and things y'all have to be doing. And, you know, I can't, you know.
I do want to leave with one question. When you ask how many sponsees, now does that count the guys that are in treatment that I agree to sponsor that know they're going directly to jail when they get out, and the first call they get out is, "Can you put some money on my books? I'm gonna be in here about 3 years."
No.
You know that because I have a bunch of those.
No,
I got like
about
100.
The guys you worked, you got 100.
God, no.
Those.
How do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, they're in parish jails that I didn't even know that parish was in Louisiana. They're like, "Hey, remember me?" I'm like, "No, man, my mom said I should call you. You're my sponsor."
It's probably all St. Bernard.
Celine or something?
Yeah.
Sabine. I got that one the other day.
Sabine.
Sabine. There
Parish.
you go. That one.
And there's a lot of
Lot of
parishes out there
those.
you don't realize exist, you know.
Till you get calls from the county jail.
Or you have to move
parish
all over
jail.
the state. So, again, I appreciate you guys. Look forward to seeing you next week. This is the Grouch and the Brainstorm.